All right, boys, we're back for UFC Vegas 102. Jared Cannonier versus Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues. This is going to be a quick picks video. I'm running way behind this week. I took the family on a little vacation, took my sons to Disney World. Everybody had a good time. Got to unplug for 4 or 5 days, not really focus on content or anything else, but just spending time with family. It was a much needed break. I feel rejuvenated, energized. I'm super pumped for this card. I actually think this is one of the better Apex cards that we've got from the UFC for a while. But again, I'm not going to give a super detailed breakdown. I'm going to give a few points here and there, who I think is going to win the fight. Not much editing is going to go on in this video because I'm going to try to get it out to be up by Friday morning. So without any further ado, the first fight on the card, we're getting Julia Avila taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Now, for Julia Avila, I liked what I saw when she came into the UFC, but she beats Pani Kinzad in her debut, then fights Gina Mazzani and wins that fight by knockout or TKO. Submits Yulia Stoliarenko. Outside of Pani Kinzad, not the highest level of competition. Loses to Yara Eubanks, where she was just taken down, kind of beat up a little bit. But the concerning fight and the big red flag was her recent fight against Misha Tate, where Misha Tate took her down 4 times, outstruck her 32-3. Avila is coming off of having a baby. That changes people. We've seen it time and time again. We even actually saw it happen to Misha Tate when she came back to the UFC. So, yeah, man, I don't like that for Julia here. I've seen her Instagram. I mean, it looks like she's training a little bit, but there's also pictures where it's her and her daughter in their garage gym, and it's, the caption something like, you got to get in work when you can. Along the lines of, she doesn't really have all the time in the world to train like she wants, but she's going to do everything she can when she has the opportunity. I understand it. I get it. Family first. Kids are a lot. But, if you want to be a high level UFC fighter, you got to make sacrifices, selfishly enough. And on the other side, Jacqueline Cavalcanti is younger. I think she's just getting started. I think she's hungry. She's 3-0 now in the UFC. 2 of those wins are by split decision to Nora Cornell and Josiane Nunez, who are not great fighters, but those shouldn't have been split decisions. I mean, she outstruck Josiane Nunez 91-52, and it was a split decision. I mean, come on. And then against Nora Cornell, I thought she clearly won, had the bigger moments, all that. So I'm going to go with youth. I'm going to go with better striking or more technical striking. And I don't really think Julia Avila is going to be able to get this fight to the ground. And if she does, I think Cavalcanti works her way back up. I'm taking Jacqueline Cavalcanti to win the first fight. I actually kind of like her to win inside the distance. I think this is Julia Avila's, she's getting closer to probably hanging it up. I don't really think she's got what she used to have in the tank. So, yeah, give me Cavalcanti here. Next fight, Dontel Mays, Walter Walker. Dontel Mays, everybody knows the story with him. He's scratched off a few wins in the UFC, but he's also lost to some bad fighters. The Alan Crowder loss on the Contender Series where he got finished via elbows. I mean, losing to Augusto Sakai after Augusto Sakai had been knocked out like 4 consecutive fights. Rodrigo Nascimento, Shamil Gadziev took him down twice in that fight and just controlled the whole fight. Dontel Mays doesn't throw a bunch of volume. He doesn't land a ton of strikes in fights. Sometimes he kind of gets stuck just mirroring his opponents. He's not super explosive. I mean, he's 6'6". He's a big guy. You would think he holds a lot more power. He just really doesn't. He gets stuck on his back when guys take him down. And so now you got a younger guy in Walter Walker who his striking's not very good either. He's not going to throw a ton of volume whatsoever, but he will look for takedowns. He lands them at a pretty high percentage at the UFC. And he's got a decent submission game too. It looks like he's gotten in phenomenal shape compared to what he was when he came into the UFC and lost to Lucas Dresky. Since then, it looks like he's dialed things in. It looks like he's taken it more serious. And if he gets takedowns in this fight, I expect him to beat Dontel Mays. I'll take Walter Walker to win the fight, but not really interested in betting that whatsoever. Next fight, Vince Morales taking on Elijah Smith. This one is super interesting because Elijah Smith is in a category with these guys coming off of Dana White's Contender Series that have a bunch of hype that people think are going to succeed at the UFC level. I put him in that same group as Austin Bashi, Cody Steele, Elijah Smith. These guys were the top prospects that got contracts on the last season. So far, Cody Steele lost last weekend, lost convincingly, and then Austin Bashi, just completely dominated by C-Rod throughout the course of that fight. So maybe Elijah Smith breaks the curse here. The one difference in him or his opponent compared to those other guys that lost is that Vince Morales doesn't have that real he's not a real veteran. I mean, he was in the UFC, yeah, sure, fought some good competition, but he was never super impressive. The guys he was beating outside of Amin Zahabi, his only wins were Draco Rodriguez and Luis Smolka. I mean, he's not beating Miles Johns or Chris Gutierrez or Benito Lopez anyways. Like those are the fights he was losing, and they're good fighters. But he's losing all of those fights very convincingly. So I do think he's got decent cardio. I do think he's a well-rounded fighter. He just doesn't do anything great. And how he's going to win this fight is that if Elijah Smith starts to gas out in that second round or the third round, then Vince Morales can kind of use his experience to have a good third, to win that third round, and things could all come down to round number 2. So Elijah Smith could finish him, yes. Vince Morales actually though is he's notoriously hard to finish. I think the only guy really in the UFC to finish him was Chris Gutierrez by knockout. Everybody else is beating him by decision. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. For the pick, I think Elijah Smith does have enough in the tank to win the first 2 rounds, but this is very sketchy. If you see Elijah Smith start to get tired in round 2, I think you live bet Vince Morales here. All right, next up, Gabriel Bonfim versus Chaos Williams. I've watched the tape on both these guys this past week, and I'm super unimpressed at times with Gabriel Bonfim. I mean, sure, there's times he looks really good. He submits Munir Lazez and Trevin Giles both in his first 2 UFC fights, and they both came in that first round. He got a takedown against Trevin Giles. Not much striking, not much ground and pound or anything. He just gets the submission via guillotine. Munir Lazez kind of made a mistake there, fell into the guillotine. But then he fights Nicholas Dalby, and dude, his cardio just looked awful. I mean, he kind of showed in that spot that if he's fighting decent fighters, he's got to get him out of there in round 1, or else if these guys have good cardio and good striking, they can really do damage. They can take over with the pace. If they throw more volume than him, they're going to win round 2 and round 3 at a high clip. So that was a bad look, even though Dalby's a monster. But his next fight was Ange Losa, and although he outstruck him 101-52, I mean, Ange Losa's cardio is not good whatsoever. By round 2, Losa, his arms were hanging down to his hips. He was tired. He wasn't able to generate any explosive punches or any kind of striking whatsoever, and was just a sitting duck. And Gabriel Bonfim landed some good knees, but he looked tired too. It's not like he was landing anything devastating. A lot of guys hurt Ange Losa. Ange Losa has the, he kind of gives up at times. You look at the Brian Battle fight, and Gabriel Bonfim took him to decision. So don't really like seeing that either, especially when you're fighting a guy in Chaos Williams who, has only lost to Michel Pereira and Randy Brown. In that Randy Brown fight, he had an argument to win the fight. It was a split decision loss. And then Michel Pereira, he survived 3 rounds with him, outstruck Michel Pereira, and Pereira had to rely on a couple of takedowns to get that win. So, Chaos is a guy who has proved he can fight for 3 rounds. He's landed 150, 130 significant strikes in the course of 5 rounds before, 3 rounds, before. And he does hold a lot of power. It's not like his striking is super technical, but if you can't get him out of there in the first rounds, if you're Gabriel Bonfim, I think Bonfim could be in trouble. I do think Chaos will have a little more in the tank, has a little more pop on his shots, and all it's going to take is that one big sequence for Gabriel Bonfim to start even getting more tired and more tired. So I don't know if I'm willing to bet Chaos Williams right now. I don't know if he's a big enough dog for me here, because I do think Bonfim is talented and has finishing ability early, but I do like that plus 3.5. If this fight goes long, I definitely think Chaos Williams could win and should win that 3rd round. So, a spread bet on him plus 3.5, if you can get a decent number, probably not a bad idea in this spot. All right, next fight, we are getting Jesus Aguilar taking on Rafael Estom. This is kind of a clash of styles a little bit. Same style. I mean, Estevam, he made his debut against Charles Johnson. That is a super hard debut to get, and he beat him over the course of 3 rounds. He was outstruck badly, mainly because of that 3rd round when he gassed and got really tired. But through the 1st and 2nd round, he used his wrestling, he used his grappling. He might have got stuffed on a lot of takedowns, but Charles Johnson has good takedown defense, or at least he has a good get-up game, and Estevam just stuck to him like glue. Easily won the first 2, and then, like I said, got tired. Charles Johnson kind of came back, hit him with a bunch of body kicks, had him hurt, couldn't finish it, and Charles Johnson loses a decision there. For Aguilar, he's a small guy, man. He's 5'4", 62-inch reach. Submitted Stuart Nickel in his last fight. That was Stuart's debut. Before that, beats Mateusz Mendonça by split decision. There was only 19 significant strikes landed for Aguilar in that spot with only one takedown. I mean, not much output there whatsoever in any category. And before that, knocks out Shannon Ross, who everybody at the UFC level has and will knock out Shannon Ross. And then his only loss, Tatsuro Taira. Understandable. Don't really rate that fight whatsoever against him because Tatsuro Taira is the truth. So, yeah, man, Aguilar has a good guillotine. His striking, he's got a little power in the overhand right, but outside of that, he doesn't offer a whole lot of technical striking. He's not going to go out there and win a bunch of boxing matches or anything at the UFC level. Whereas Estevam is going to be the bigger guy here, 4 inches taller. He's going to have 7 inches of reach. And, from the outside, he throws good kicks. He's got some power, especially with the body kicks. He'll come upstairs and throw kicks to the head. He'll chew up the leg, and then he'll mix in the wrestling as well. So if he can stay out of that guillotine, I honestly think Estevam should cruise to some kind of decision victory or even possibly find that submission. I don't think he knocks him out, but he is very strong. He's got a hell of a squeeze and good jiu-jitsu to go along with the wrestling. So if he wins by sub, not going to surprise me whatsoever. But I do think Rafael Estevam wins the fight in one way or another. All right, next fight up, we get Jared Gordon versus Mashrajan Ruzabayev. I might have butchered that first name, but Ruzabayev is coming in on short notice here. If you look at pictures of him, this guy doesn't look athletic whatsoever. He's got a record at 20 wins and 4 losses. 12 of those wins come by knockout, 5 come by submission. But dude, go look at the tapology on this dude, and he's fighting absolute cans. Some of these fights are even flagged for being fixed fights early on in his career. The guys he's knocking out have losing records. Jared Gordon is a guy who has been finished before by knockout and TKO, but it's against top guys. It's against Charles Oliveira. At the time he was losing to, let's see. Yeah, Charles Oliveira, Diego Ferreira. That was back in 2018, 7 years ago, which Diego was, in his lower 30s, an absolute savage, completely, he can run through guys with the wrestling, but if you get caught on the feet with Diego, he's got so much power in his hands, especially when he was younger. So, he gets finished there, and then he gets finished by Joaquim Silva, and everybody knows Silva is kind of a killer be killed guy with powerful striking, good jiu-jitsu, and, very tough to beat and tough to finish. I mean, Joaquim Silva damn near knocked out Arman Sarukian, had him really badly hurt in that second round, but couldn't finish the show. So since then, Jared Gordon got knocked out by Charles Oliveira back in 2019. That's 6 years ago. Hasn't been finished by knockout since. Kind of a unlucky streak. Loses to Nasrat Haqparast in a fight many people thought he won. Gets the no contest against Bobby King Green because of the headbutt, and then loses to Paddy Pimblett by unanimous decision, which a lot of people expected to hear Gordon's name called when they said it was unanimous because he clearly won that fight. So, yeah, I think Gordon has all the tools to win this fight. If he stays on the feet with him, I think he can compete with the boxing. And if he doesn't get knocked out, Jared Gordon should have way better cardio. I think he can mix in a wrestling of his own here to tire out Ruzabayev if he needs to. And ultimately, I think Gordon finds a finish here, maybe by submission, maybe by knockout or TKO later in the fight. But one way or the other, I believe Jared Gordon is going to be the winner of this fight. All right, next fight, Angela Hill versus Ketlin Souza. This is a tough one because Angie Hill is your typical veteran in the UFC. She's fought everybody. She's racked up wins. She has her fair share of losses, but the experience is so valuable, and you can see it every time she fights. She doesn't really waste a ton of energy. She's notoriously had good cardio. Her output, I mean, she's like top 3, I believe, in most significant strikes landed in the UFC's history, in company with guys like Max Holloway and Sean Strickland. So Angie Hill is a Hall of Famer, never going to win the belt, never touched gold, but, has given a great account of herself in basically every fight that she's in. Her last fight, she loses to Tabitha Ricci. That's kind of the telltale sign that maybe she's a step slower than she used to be. She's 40 years old, fighting these younger girls who are hungry. Angela Hill's done it all besides fight for belts. She's fought everybody. I just think it's kind of that passing of the torch, or it's the next girl up here. And Ketlin Souza has proved that she's very, very dangerous, especially, with the striking. She goes out there against Marnik Man and puts on a clinic, has her hurt, busts her up, wins the fight easily. She goes out there against Yasmin Jauregui. Jauregui was a massive favorite in that spot, and Ketlin Souza just blasts her with a left hook, drops Jauregui, and then locks in the submission super fast and chokes her unconscious. Jauregui couldn't even tap. She had such a squeeze, and that thing was in so tight. So, yeah, I think Souza definitely way less experience, especially at the UFC level, but way more dangerous right now than Angie Hill. And I do think at some point you're going to see Hill start to get hurt even more. I mean, look at the Mackenzie Dern fight with Angela Hill just 2 years ago. She was getting hurt pretty badly. Mackenzie Dern landed a knockdown, landed 126 significant strikes to Angie's 66. Since then, Angie Hill fought Denise Gomes, who kind of gassed out, and Angela Hill used her wrestling to make her even more tired and win the fight. And then she fights Luana Pinejo, who I don't believe is UFC level whatsoever, and she submits her. And then loses to Tabitha Ricci, whose striking isn't powerful. She throws volume, but her striking's not great. Tabitha Ricci likes to wrestle and look for her jiu-jitsu, and she did that. She wrestled somewhat successfully in that spot too. I just think Ketlin Souza, anywhere the fight goes, is going to be competitive, and she's got the advantage as far as power goes, submission skill goes, and she's going to be the more dangerous fighter in this spot. So I hate fading Angie Hill because she's always in the fight, but I do think Ketlin Souza probably gets her hand raised in this spot. Next fight up, we're getting Connor Matthews, Jose Delgado. I've seen a lot of people hesitant about taking Jose Delgado or parlaying him in this week, and I honestly agree. I think these guys coming off the Contender Series, Delgado's kind of in the same boat as Elijah Smith. All their peers that are in that hyped up category of the best fighters that come off the show this past year are losing. They're getting great, not great fighters, but they're getting guys with good experience and good skill sets in their debut, and they're losing. Drawing C-Rod, Rong Zhu, who's had a UFC stint before this one. The only difference with these two, Elijah Smith and Jose Delgado, like I mentioned earlier, is they're getting guys who don't have much experience either and who aren't the most skilled guys in the world. Jose Delgado will fight Connor Matthews, who on the Contender Series actually fought Francis Marshall first and lost a decision. Then got called back to the Contender Series the next year and fights Yar Faraz and loses that one, or wins that one by decision. Had to mix in 7 takedowns to get it done. Makes his UFC debut against Dennis Bazooka. He came out really hot and came out really aggressive. And it was kind of the wrong game plan because Dennis Bazooka, he was coming off of his debut loss. He was locked in. He needed the win. And he just had better cardio, had better striking. Connor Matthews started to wilt and eventually got put out in that third round. I just think Delgado, while this fight is standing, Delgado is going to be cleaner. He's probably going to land at a higher percentage, and he's got power, and he's flashy, and he throws spinning kicks and stuff, and he has that knockout power that we could definitely see here. But, I haven't really seen what Delgado's got after facing some adversity and going deeper into fights. He trains at a good gym. He's at MMA Lab out of Arizona. Everybody knows, Sean O'Malley trains down there, and a bunch of guys who are very, very good and at the very tip top of the divisions in the UFC. He's got good coaching around him, good gym, good guys. But there's still more to be seen on both of these guys, to be honest. But I want to see Delgado face a little adversity. I want to see him get pushed a little and have to fight deeper into the fight before, I'm comfortable paying this price on him against the guy in Connor Matthews, who, is not a great fighter, but he's made his debut already. He's kind of, probably locked in wanting to get his first UFC win, and it's probably going to get the best version of him here. So I'll take Delgado to win, but again, this is a sketchy fight. I'd be very careful, and if you're parlaying Delgado, just don't be surprised if that thing gets busted. All right, Rodolfo Vieira taking on Andre Petroski. Oh, man, this one's tough. Like, Vieira's a bigger favorite here, but Petroski, he's on a 2-fight win streak. I mean, he's beaten guys that suck. Josh Frim, and Dylan Budka, who's on this card too. Against Dylan Budka, he was able to take Budka down a few times. He didn't really land many strikes or anything like that, but he did enough to win all 3 rounds. Same thing with Frim. Took him down 3 times. Every time he got a takedown, Frim had no answer to get back to his feet. That's how he won the fight. Loses against Jacob Malkoun, where he knocked himself out against Malkoun's hip. Loses to Michelle Pereira by first-round knockout badly in the fight before that. And then beats GM3 by split decision. Wellington Turman, that's a decent win. Nick Maximov, guys that aren't really, moving up in the ranks in the UFC. So Yeah, I think Petroski holds a little power in his hands, but when you watch him strike at distance, he's very hesitant. It's like he looks uncomfortable when he's there. Like he wants to get his wrestling going. He's got a college wrestling background. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu too. Like that's usually his game plan. But the problem is you go up against the guy in Rodolfo Vieira who is maybe the highest level submission artist in this division. Like the guy is insane. Gets a ton of submissions. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. Both of those come by sub. He subbed Dustin Soltzfus, subbed a few other guys to kick off his UFC career as well. So his only losses are Fluffy Hernandez and Chris Curtis, two respected fighters, especially Fluffy. And then Chris Curtis, that was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Chris Curtis was, still dishing out a ton of damage and stuffing a ton of takedowns. So I do think wherever this fight goes, Vieira might hold the slight advantage. Probably doesn't have a power advantage on the feet, but he's got a decent jab. His boxing isn't terrible, and I think he'll throw more volume if they get stuck in a striking battle than a guy like Andre Petroski. Sorry. If Petroski goes for the wrestling, watch your neck. He could get subbed at any minute. I don't really see Petroski subbing Vieira. The only way he would is if Vieira gassed out and Petroski's got much more in the tank. But I just think, again, Vieira is probably going to have him covered in most spots in this fight besides the power. The submission game is nasty. I'll go with Vieira for the pick. All right, next fight. We are in our last, or yeah, I guess that was the kickoff the main card. Now we get Ismail Bonfim versus Nazim Sadikov. I think Ismail is the better Bonfim brother. He doesn't look as panicky in there after the first round. Ismail kind of learned his lesson 2 fights ago. Ismail came into the UFC and fought Terrence McKinney. The line was very even. He went out there and flatlined him with a knee in the second round after McKinney was starting to gas. Then he draws Benoit Saint-Denis. And this fight's a big reason why Benoit Saint-Denis had a ton of hype. Ismail Bonfim came out hot, was landing some good kicks, looked very, very good. He was running 100 mile an hour, and it bit him in the ass. Benoit Saint-Denis was able to get takedowns off of his overextensions and off of, Bonfim just being reckless. And BSD takes the back and finds the sub. After that, Ismail gets Vince Pichel. Vince Pichel is an older fighter who has taken some damage. I mean, Vince Pichel is, oh man, is he 40, 41? And Ismail Bonfim can't go out there and finish him. I mean, it wasn't a great look. It was a boring fight. It was on the feet for most of it. And Bonfim would land some leg kicks, some jabs, and just really wasn't being super aggressive. I mean, it got him the win, obviously, but it just wasn't a super impressive win by any standards. Now he's getting Azim Sajikov, who, is kind of lacking that dominant or big win himself. I mean, he was kind of losing the fight to Terrence McKinney in the first round, and then Terrence McKinney gasses out and he gets the sub. Before that, he's losing the first 2 rounds to Evan Elder, and Evan Elder takes a shot and gets cut, and the doctor came in and stopped the fight. Then he goes to a draw with Vyacheslav Borshev, where he had Vyacheslav dead to rights in round 2. It was a 10-8 round for him, according to the judges. But after that, after having him so badly hurt and looked like he was exhausted, Vyacheslav came out there and dominated the 3rd round on the feet with the striking. So, Nazim is very talented. You'll see that when he fights. He can fight you anywhere. With the striking, he's got power. With the wrestling, he's very good. The jiu-jitsu is there. He trains with guys like Aljo and Marab. But he's just missing almost that killer instinct at times. And, if he had that, I'd be way more inclined to bet him here against Ismail Bonfim. But, if they get stuck in a striking battle, I think Bonfim's going to be a slight bit faster, maybe a little more technical and, when he wants to be, maybe a little more slick with the striking. So I'll take Bonfim. Man, I flip-flop back and forth with this. I'll take Bonfim for the pick, but from a betting standpoint, I do think there's a little bit of value on Sajikov for what it's worth. I know you can't really go out there and just bet because there's value on a guy, but he is dangerous. He does have good skills, and he could make this very, very close. I think a bet, if you get a good enough number, that plus 3.5 again would be a decent bet. I mean, if Bonfim's not finishing Vince Pichel and Nazim Sajikov goes out there in an all-out war with Vyacheslav Borshev and doesn't get finished, I don't know if Bonfim's going to finish him here, and I do think Nazim could steal a round or even 2. So, yeah, plus 3.5 spread on Nazim Sajikov would look pretty decent. All right, 3 fights left. Now we get Edmund Shabazian taking on Dylan Budka. Man, this is Shabazian's last chance. It's got to be. I mean, the guy has kind of been a letdown, but not really his fault. I think the UFC pushed him super fast. He came in very, very young into the UFC and looked phenomenal. on the Contender Series. That knockout he had in the first round looked very good. Beats Darren Stewart in his debut. Then he gets a knockout over Charles Birdie, submits Jack Marshman, knocks out Brad Tavares. Everybody kind of wrote him as this next big prospect. His striking super clean. He's explosive. He's tough. And then he draws Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson would just take him down the whole fight and kind of showed that that's where Edmund Shabazian is going to get beat. He doesn't have great takedown defense. If you can put him on his back, he has a hard time getting up. And he wilts a little bit, and he'll start to slow down. And Derek Brunson was able to find that third round finish. Jack Hermanson kind of took the blueprint from Brunson and just decided to wrestle and take him down. He did so successfully. He got 3 takedowns, won the fight easily. After that, he draws Nasruddin Imavov, where he was just outstruck. He wasn't as fast as Imavov, and hats off to Imavov there. Imavov's a tough customer, a guy who just knocked out Izzy, a guy who's going to be fighting for titles in the next year. So, the theme here was Edmund looked great when he was fighting the middle level of competition, but they pushed him a little fast with all these killers, and he started losing fights. Since then, his only wins: AJ Dobson, Dolce Lumgambula, loses to Fluffy Hernandez, and as of recently, he was winning against GM3 pretty easily, and then gets submitted in that second round after a big mistake on his end. So yeah, he's a guy who will win a lot of striking battles, but will give up takedowns. And once he gives up takedowns, especially in rounds 2 and 3, he kind of starts to wilt. He kind of, if you show him the door, a lot of times he'll take it. So it's interesting because Dylan Budka possesses that style. What he's going to want to do is march forward. He'll stand and trade with guys, but he's going to look for takedowns. He's going to look to get the wrestling going, and that's how he's won fights on the regional scene. It just hasn't really panned out at the UFC level whatsoever. I mean, look at who he's fighting, though. I mean, Cesar Almeida, that's a tough fight for your debut. And Cesar Almeida couldn't really stuff the takedowns in the first round, but Budka started getting tired as the fight went on, trying to control him, and he was eating elbows to the side of the head, and eventually it was just too much, and Budka crumbled to Cesar Almeida. So next fight, he gets Andre Petroski. Petroski takes Budka down 3 times, like I mentioned earlier. Super boring fight, and he wins that. So, if Budka doesn't get knocked out in the first and his cardio is better than Shabazian and he can get the wrestling going, maybe he makes this fight close. I just see Edmund being so much better with the striking and be able to hit him to make him hesitant about shooting shots. And when he does shoot, I think Edmund can land damage with the elbows in close. And in the clinch, I think Shabazian will have a big advantage too. So I'm not betting on Edmund Shabazian. I never will again after what we've seen, but I do think he should win this fight. The price, though, not intriguing to me whatsoever. If Budka loses, probably the last time you're going to see him. I'll take Edmund Shabazian, but again, I wouldn't be betting on this fight. All right, co-main event, Calvin Kattar, Youssef Zalal. Zalal has been super impressive in his return to the UFC. Everybody knows he came into the UFC back in 2020, got on a 3-fight win streak to guys who honestly sucked. And then he draws Ilia Topuria, went to a decision with him, lost via decision. Ilia went with the wrestling in that fight. That was his style for Youssef Zalal. Took him down 5 times, controlled him, only landed 13 significant strikes. Ilia Topuria only landed 13 significant strikes against Youssef Zalal, but he had 5 takedown attempts and looked to get the grappling going. Gets Sung Woo Choi, a tough out, a guy who's hits hard and is dangerous. Loses that fight by decision. Then he loses a split decision to Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson's a guy who's racking up tons of wins right now. I believe he's 8-1 or 9-1 in the UFC. He's got a phenomenal record, and he's super tall, super long, and he's hard to deal with. And then his next fight after that, it's a draw with Damon Blackshear, and the UFC cuts him off of that draw. So kind of disappointing because I think Zalal has always been a decent fighter. But, he goes back to the regional scene, collects himself, gets his head on right, starts training hard, and shows that he wants it. Gets back into the UFC, submits Billy Q. That was one of my favorite plays that I made in 2024. Submits Billy Q, goes up against Jarno Aaron, submits him in the first round. Jarno had nothing for him, and then goes in against Jack Shore, a guy with good grappling, not the best striking, but, Youssef Zalal went out there, took Jack Shore down once, and submitted him. Actually knocked him down first and submitted him. So Zalal's on a 3-fight win streak since he returned to the UFC. All 3 of those come by submission in either the first or second round. He's very talented. He's very good. He's much younger here than a Calvin Kattar. And, Calvin Kattar's always been a phenomenal fighter too. It's just he's older now, upper 30s, been in a lot of wars, taken a ton of damage, and it's starting to show, in my opinion. I mean, he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. The Max Holloway fight had to have taken years off of his life, man. Max Holloway landed 445 significant strikes, just dominant from pillar to post. His face was mangled. Next, Calvin goes out there and beats Giga Chikadze. Chikadze did not look good whatsoever. 5-round fight. Calvin Kattar won pretty convincingly. But then he's fighting Josh Emmett. Split decision, yes, but you're taking over 100 significant strikes from Josh Emmett. Not a fun time. That's a lot of damage. Goes out there and blows his knee out against Arnold Allen. That's the big thing for me. I mean, a knee injury like that, these guys at the UFC just don't come back the same. They're not as explosive. Their movement's not as good, and you can't really blame them. I mean, having a big knee surgery like that, uh, and learning how to, pivot off that knee, explode off that knee, it's tough, especially when you're a little bit older in the game now and you've had all these wars and you've taken all this damage. So, he comes back off that injury 2 years later and he fights Aljamain Sterling. Aljo did exactly what you need to do to beat Calvin Kattar. He went with the wrestling. He took him down 8 times. He didn't submit Calvin, but he didn't really look for a ton of submissions either. But Aljo has proved to be time and time again one of the best fighters in 135 or 145. He was the champ at 135 forever, and he hasn't lost yet at 145 pounds. So that's a tough fight for Kattar. But now you're getting Yusuf Zalal, a guy who's younger, a guy who's still developing. He's getting better each fight, and he's got that nasty grappling and submission game. Is he going to be a super dominant wrestler? I don't think Zalal is. I don't think he's a super dominant wrestler. I just think, he does find ways to get fights to the ground, whether it's his opponent making his mistakes, whether it's taking the back standing and putting hooks in and fishing for subs until they fall over, whatever it is. Zalal gets it to the mat and he finishes a lot of guys. So pause. But, Calvin Kattar, I love the guy. One of my favorite fighters to watch over the course of the last 10 years. But now it's just he's taking too much damage. He's a little too old, and those injuries are hard to come back from. So I got to take Yusuf Zalal. Does he submit him? I don't know. Calvin Kattar is a tough son of a bitch who I don't believe has ever been submitted in the UFC. So we'll see what happens. If anybody can submit him, it's probably right now. The timing's good for Zalal to get one over a guy who's kind of busted up and older. All right, main event time. Jared Cannonier, Gregory Rodrigues. This is a tough one to call because Jared Cannonier has been fighting at the top of the division for a long time now. His striking is good. He's powerful. He's been tough throughout his career. As of lately, he's taken a ton of damage, and it's starting to show. But, notoriously, he can eat shots. Went to a decision with Izzy in 2022 in a title fight. Beat Sean Strickland by split decision the fight after that. Beat Marvin Vettori by decision where he looked phenomenal. Landed 241 significant strikes with 4 takedowns. But, I look at Marvin Vettori now, and I just think, he's kind of a punching bag. Yeah, he's hard to knock out. He's never been knocked down, whatever the case may be. But he's a punching bag, man. He doesn't move his head. And a guy like Cannonier, who's explosive, athletic, was able to find the target all night long. Goes in against Imavov and was looking good through the first round and a half. Slowed down, man. He started eating some decent shots from Imavov, and his body language shifted. He looked very, very tired, exhausted. And, in that 4th round, Imavov landed a good sequence. And Cannonier just did not look good whatsoever with the body language. And the ref stopped the fight after he got hurt pretty badly. Maybe it was an early stoppage, but if the ref lets it go, Imavov just starts teeing off and gets the finish anyways. So either way, I think Imavov was on route to win that fight. Then he draws Caio Bahayo, a guy who's climbing the ranks as well, a guy who will fight for titles in the next 2 years, and just gets, kind of beat up over the course of 5 rounds. Caio landed a knockdown at the end. He outstruck him 153-83. Just gave Jared Cannonier a ton of damage. And, Caio is a guy who has really good wrestling and submit in a submission game, and he was able to go out there and strike and beat Jared Cannonier convincingly with the striking in that spot. So now you're getting Gregory Rodrigues, a guy whose only real flaw has kind of been his chin. But, the guy he's getting knocked out by, Jordan Williams on the Contender Series, not a great look. Bruno Fajeda, a guy with a lot of power, but not the best fighter in the world whatsoever. So, Gregory Rodrigues has shown that if you touch him, you can hurt him. The guy has been in some wars as well. The guy's chin is not, granite by any means, but he is a guy who's very skilled. He's a guy who has a high output, and, he can mix in takedowns. He's a black belt. He can find submissions too. And, this is a 41-year-old Cannonier going up against Rodrigues, who is 32 or 3 years old. So Gregory Rodrigues, right at the end of his prime. I just got to go with the younger fighter, man. I think Cannonier could finish him in the first two, but if it goes past that, I think RoboCop just starts to pile up damage until Jared Cannonier is so tired. Maybe he gets knocked down. If he does and you get RoboCop on top of you, it's going to be a long night for Cannonier. If RoboCop gets on top of him with the wrestling or however it may be, and Cannonier's gassed or hurt, I think RoboCop could find a submission here just from Cannonier being exhausted, giving up his back, and just getting a choke sunk in. Like, I could see that happening, and the odds are pretty crazy for it too. Um, Other than that, I do think this fight ends inside the distance. Cannonier does have the ability to knock out RoboCop. He's a very skilled striker with power. But on the flip side, Cannonier will kind of wilt if RoboCop can put together some big shots and big exchanges, especially early in the fight. So I'll go with RoboCop. I don't really, I don't like love his money line at this price by any means, but I do kind of like an under here. We'll see if it kind of bounces up or what it does as we get closer to Saturday. But yeah, man, give me RoboCop. And that's the breakdown. Again, sorry guys, I was on vacation. I'll get these videos out at the beginning of the week for now on, maybe even Sundays going forward, try to beat the crowd. But I appreciate you guys, all of you who are subscribed here on YouTube. Thank you for liking the videos, commenting. I love reading them. I like interacting with you guys. So keep doing that going forward. It's much appreciated. You can follow me on all my social medias at The Parlay, TikTok, Instagram, here on YouTube, on X. I'm going to start getting more active there. And if you want to get all of my bets every single week, go to winnable.com/HOF picks, and we'll give a promo code out weekly to get you your first sign up. You'll get a free trial, get all of our bets for free. It's me and Hey Jive Picks giving our bets. But, we got a Discord community with over 3,000 members, I think now. I think we're closer to 3,500. Ton of people in there giving game, giving bets, giving plays. Maddie Betts has a channel in there. We got other guys. We're bringing on more and more as we go on. Home of Fight is going to be massive, so make sure you go follow them. Make sure you join the free Discord. And if you want to get all of our bets, join the premium section of the Discord. Again, winnable.com/HOF picks. Appreciate you guys being here. I'll be back in the next video to break down the UFC Seattle. Good luck this weekend if you're betting on this card, and we will see you next week.